Okay, hello YouTube viewers. What we're doing today here is we're gonna change a front wheel bearing on a front wheel drive car. Now, this is gonna be done strictly with hand tools. There'll be no air tools used whatsoever, and I have to save all the cotter pins. So the CV axle nut here, gotta save that, and then the one on the tie rod end inside. So I'm gonna go through the step-by-step process. I'm gonna cut out the video if I run into problems or something like that. But I'm gonna go through step-by-step how to do this. Using nothing but hand tools, no hydraulic press. Using special wheel bearing press tools you can get on Amazon. So the major tools you'll need is obviously a front wheel drive bearing press kit. I think it's about $100 on Amazon Canadian. A slide hammer kit and it goes onto the hub. You'll see it, and it pulls the hub out. And then you need some special tricks and stuff to get the big snap ring in here out that holds the bearing in the spindle. So you guys will get to see it as we go through. I'm going to try and do it on the car, and I'll try and videotape it the best I can, but in order to do this on the car I have to be able to get the CV axle out of the spindle and bearing assembly. Car's running right now just because I got stuff charging inside, like stuff for the grinder in case I need it, and the drill and all that kind of stuff. But once I get kind of going on this, I'll shut the car off if the sound of the engine running is being a bit of a problem. So the car's secured right now, parking brake's set. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get this CV axle nut off. You want to do this with the tire on the car so it's holding it from spinning when you're trying to reef on this thing, because there's quite a bit of torque in these nuts sometimes. And so we're going to start with that, and then I'm going to loosen off the lug nuts and then jack the car up. So let me fire my light on here because it's still kind of dark early in the morning. So I was lucky. This cotter pin's going to come right out. It's not rusted in there too badly. If you have any problems with this cotter pin, throw water on it. Seriously, water. It disperses the rust. And just get your pliers on here and just wiggle it with the water on it. Keep putting water on it, keep wiggling, and it'll loosen all the rust up that's in there, and the cotter pin will come right out. So I'm going to save this, and let me see if I can get my socket for that. I think it's this one. No, bigger. Perfect. Okay, let me grab a Johnson bar. Okay, I got about a 3 or 4 foot long half-inch drive breaker bar. We're going to give this a shot, see if we can get it off. Okay, this one's pretty tight. Okay, I'm going to throw the car in gear and see if that'll stop it. Okay, that one's pretty tight. Okay, give me a few minutes, I'll get this off. Okay, so the car's running again. I got the CV axle nut loose, and yeah, it was a tight one. I ended up having to jump on this ratchet to get it off. As you can see, I got it. Older car, right? So stuff's gonna be rusty. So I'm just gonna loosen this off pretty much all the way out, just to make sure that I don't run into any problems as it's coming off. Okay, so that's loose, just sitting there on the end. This nut and the axle shaft itself is what holds the bearing in here together, and you'll see when we get it apart what the bearing looks like, but this nut has to be tight. All right, I think a lot of manufacturers go with a torque like 250 foot-pounds or something like that. Check your owner's manual or factory service manual for how tight these nuts should be. I usually just run them on with the impact until it stops, and that's usually around 400 foot-pounds. The bearing is designed to give itself its own clearance when you tighten this up, so make sure when you put these together you tighten this nut right up. If you don't, the CV axle will turn the splines, and that can be a problem. It'll eventually wear the splines out, or it won't have proper clearance on the wheel bearing, and then you'll end up wearing the wheel bearing out, you know, quicker than it should be. So I'm gonna get the ratchet, we're gonna take the lug nuts off, I'm gonna jack the car, put a jack stand under it, and then we're gonna get started. Just getting them loose, I'm not taking them all the way off. Okay, so wheel nuts are loose. Get the jack hole in here. If you're not sure where to jack your car, check in your owner's manual on your tire changing. Usually there's little notches in the rocker here you put your jack on. If you've got skirt kits on your car, if you look right underneath them, you'll see the little notches, or there's usually a little plate sticking down, a little thick plate that's kind of welded in behind there. And that's usually where you put the jack. Let me get the car just off the ground, grab a jack stand for under it. A little higher. Okay. Now I have the jack stand placed under the floor gusset of the car. It's the next strongest spot. And that way it's not in the way when we're working on the car here. Move the jack out of the way. Alright, let me adjust the camera here a bit. Okay. Take these wheel nuts off. I'm going to shut the car off in a second here. You can see it's trying to drag the tire around here as it runs. So I'm getting to the point now where it's going to have my fingers right in there and don't want any problems. And yes, I do lube my lug nuts. Never had any lug nuts come loose. You want to know the theory behind that? Especially on aluminum rims, is very important. When you mount up your tire, you have to make sure with aluminum rims that this area in behind here is clean of all like rust. It has to be wire wheeled down. Don't use a grinding wheel or anything, just wire wheel it or hand scrape it with the end of a file or a flat screwdriver, Scotch-Brite pad, whatever. And the same thing here. All the loose rust has to be gone. It's not a big deal with steel rims because they have flex built into them. So basically when you tighten it up, there's a bit of give so the rim can move. So any rust that's in there, it's absorbed by the rim itself. And also in behind the rotor and to the hub where they meet has to be clean. If you don't clean in behind there, your lug nut's going to come loose regardless of if you lube them or not. So it's something to keep in mind. But this really helps when you're on the side of the road and you get a flat tire. At least your lug nuts come off and you don't break studs and stuff. I've had this car for 12 years. Been lubing the lug nuts since brand new. Never had an issue with wheel nuts coming loose. So it's something to keep in mind. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to back this nut out a bit. I want to see if the CV axle is loose. These things get seized in there pretty good too. I've had this car apart a few times already, and I lubed everything before I put it together. So as you can see, the CV axle is going to slide out no problems at all. But if you're having issues with it and it's kind of seized, you get a punch and stick it in the hole here like a center punch. Grind the end into like a ball, stick it in there, and you can tap it, and usually it comes out. If you're still having issues, fire a bunch of water in there. I don't recommend hitting it with a hammer. If you're going to, put the nut on backwards and run it down. As you can see, it's not going to fit because I've never had to do it on this car. Run it down till this stud is flush with the outside of this nut, and then you can hit it fairly safely without wrecking, you know, the ends of the threads here. As you can see, this car doesn't have much of a taper sticking out that you can hammer on and, you know, mushroom it a bit without wrecking the threads, but this one's going to be pretty sensitive to it. So just very cautious when you start hammering on that. You might want air tools kicking around so that you can run the nut back off after you're done smacking away at it there. Okay, there's that nut. We're going to pull the brakes off now. Pretty sure it's a 14 mil on this car. It is. So I'm going to pull the caliper off first. Be mindful of your boots. You don't want to rip these guys because your brakes need to float freely on their slide pins that are inside here. Let me, I'm going to turn the wheel a bit. Okay, so there's a slide pin bolt on top, and there's another one on the bottom here. I loosen them both first before I take one of them out. I think I'm going the wrong way with that. Yeah, sure am. Okay. Now they're both loose, you can take them off. Obviously, if you take the bottom one out and then try and get the top one and you turn, it's going to swing the caliper up into your face, and you don't want to do that. Okay, bottom bolt's out. And top bolt. These pins, you'll see in a second here, see it slides away as I loosen the bolt off. I'll get the caliper out of the way and I'll show you. All this stuff should be free and slide nice and easy. You want to pay attention to this boot here too. When you're putting this back together, if this boot overlaps the piston here, you'll slice the thing off trying to slide it back on the pad, so pay attention to that. If it's all ballooned out, get in there with a pick or just pull it down with your thumb. Let the air out. You don't want to slice that boot because then you'll seize your piston up. These are original calipers on this car. I've never changed them. So if you're mindful, it should last you a long time. Okay, this pin's a little bit sticky. It's not terrible. As you can see, it slides pretty free in the housing. A little bit of rust on there. Maybe I'll clean that up when we put it back together. So I'm going to leave those in there. Pads should slide right out, no problem. As you can see, I'm getting a little down there on the pads, but good enough for now. Okay, don't lose these clips. A lot of rattle come out of your brakes if you lose these clips. As you can see, they all just pop off because I service the brakes fairly regularly on this car. A little dirty now. We'll fire some lube on there when I put it back together, clean the rust off. Okay, I'm going to take this caliper bracket off now. I think that's 17. Yeah, 17. Make sure you guys are in frame here. Yeah, you can kind of sort of see what's going on. I'm filming this on my cell phone and it's kind of stuck to my car mount on the side of the car. So you guys might get the best view, but if you just look, it's fairly straightforward how these things are put together. You know, brakes are the intricate one, like I just mentioned to all you guys. Make sure all these slide pins move free and all that, and nothing's all rusted together. Okay, this bottom slide pin's pretty tight. Maybe I'll have to lube that. Special grease on these, by the way. You can't use petroleum-based grease because it'll swell these boots up, and then they'll start leaking all the the water and stuff in there. Just seize it up again, anyways. So you want to keep that in mind. And there's your caliper carrier. this bottom slide pin here just a little bit tight. Yeah, see, it's all rusty in the groove here. Got to clean that out. Yeah, pretty nasty looking in there. And this boot is sitting in a groove down here. Clean all that crap out. What seizes the pin? Well, this one has the rubber boot on it on the end here. That kind of seizes it in the hole a little bit. But this boot is actually like the guide for the pin. So what happens is rust builds up in this hole and squeezes this boot on the pin. And it's a pain to get off sometimes because, you know, you try and put water and stuff in there to get it out, but because the boot is just pinched on the pin, it's difficult to get out sometimes. So when you take these apart and clean them, you got to clean in this groove. You got to get a little pick or something in there, or a small little screwdriver, and just scrape all the rust and stuff out. Synthetic lube, your basic synthetic brake lube from, you know, Canadian Tire, Napa, CarQuest, you know, whatever you got in your area is fine, as long as it's synthetic brake lube. Don't use grease like wheel bearing grease or automotive grease, you know, petroleum based stuff. Don't use it on there. It'll swell this right up. Put that down. Okay, I'm gonna get the rotor off. So this car has 2 screws that hold the rotor on. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes you can get them off with a regular screwdriver. Let's try that. Okay, these ones came out. So I just gave it a good, you know, tweak with the hand there and out it came. There's one. The other one on this side. No, she came. As you can see, I put these brakes on. I kept a lot of grease in between the hub and rotor interface. I don't know if you can see that, but it's nice and clean. There's not a whole lot of rust on the service area. Now there's a bit of stuff around the edges that I'm going to clean off so it doesn't fall in behind there when I'm trying to put this on. Because again, if this isn't tight and snug and fits flush, your lug nuts will come loose, or you break these screws off, and then you have some problems. So put this off to the side. Yeah, I'd say that wheel bearing shot for that play in there. Let me see if I can get a magnet to get that washer out. I don't have a magnet. Alright. Small screwdriver. Come on out of there. Okay, we're getting to the point where we need the slide hammer still. This is always the fun part. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a slide hammer on this hub, and we're going to yank this hub off, and basically it rips the bearing apart doing that. Alright, so 2 things can happen. One is it'll pull out and the inner race from the bearing will come out, and hopefully the balls all stay in there. So if you run into an issue and you can't do the job for some reason, you can't get the bearing out or whatever, at least that way you can put it back together. Second thing that usually happens is all the balls fall out, and then have fun finding them all, especially if you got a smooth garage floor. They freaking roll everywhere. And if you need to put it back together to drive somewhere for some reason, have fucking fun. So CV shaft is loose. And I'm going to get the slide hammer. We're going to put it on there and see what we can do with this. Okay, I grabbed both things. Okay, I'm going to take a shot of the slide hammer here so you guys can see it. Turn this light off. So this is basically the slide hammer kit. This is a OTC brand. I got this off of Amazon. I think this was 160 bucks for this one. And that's Canadian, by the way. And it has all the attachments in it. You know, you can, there's stuff for certain size hubs. I think that's for like rear axles and stuff on pickup trucks. And this one should fit the front. If not, we can use this one. So let's open it up and have a look inside. And there it is. So this is your basic slide hammer and its shaft. There's the hub pieces. All kinds of nuts and bolts, jaws. You know, I could have got what I needed from Canadian Tire for maybe 60 or 70 bucks, but I figured for 160 it gives me everything. So if I ever run into any problems, we're good to go. Okay, I'm going to pause it for a second here while I get this set up. Okay, I'll show you guys the setup of this tool here. So you take this thing and you have a look and see which one fits. So it's definitely not the big one. We need the smaller one. This one. Perfect. It's going to go all the way on. Now, get this out of here. Put it on the ground for now. So what you're going to do is you want to take your lug nuts, and we might just barely make it on this one. You want these nuts tight so this sits flush. If not, it's going to vibrate the heck out of your hands. So we're going to try it with one and see if it goes all the way down. Hopefully it does, because I don't think I have anything I can use as a spacer to put between the nut and the tool to get it all the way on there. Yeah, it's not going to go all the way, son of a gun. Well, maybe you guys will get to see me vibrate the hell out of my hands. Yeah, it's not going to go. You don't want to ram it on because it's going to pop the cap off your wheel nut, and then, you know, everything's going to rust up. So let me see, maybe I can use the CV nut there, and I got a big nut in the kit. You definitely want this thing tight. Okay, let me see what else I can do with this. I'll pause you guys so you don't have to sit here and watch this. Okay, I figured something out here. I use wrenches as our spacer. Don't worry, I hardly ever use stubbies anyway, so if I end up wrecking them, I won't be upset. I can use a smaller wrench, it doesn't fit quite right. Let's see if we can get that to go flat. Ah, it should be okay. No, I don't like it, man. I get smaller wrenches. The end is too big around and it won't sit flat, so I'm going to get a smaller one. This is 14 and a 15. Let's try 12 and a 13. I brought the 11 also just in case. 11's too small, that's what I thought. Yeah, this looks a little better. See how much easier everything works when it's all lubed up? Look at that. Just roll it on with your thumb. Yeah, I think we'll be okay with that. Lug nut. You want to tighten them kind of evenly too, because sometimes it binds up on the hub inside here, like the tool doesn't sit centered. And if that's the case, that's fine. Like, it doesn't have to sit centered, and it can be a gap just as long as you have it tightened up so it can't vibrate around when you're trying to pull on this thing. So snug these up. Tighten that on a little bit more. You don't have to reef them on either, just snug them up. Okay, in this case the tool sits nice and flat on the hub. Now, I never know if I should put these nuts on here or not for this thing. To save the, oh yeah, if you buy one of these slide hammers, make sure you put the big conical end. So that's the wrong end, that's the right end, if you can see the difference. So this area here has to kind of fit in the ball. So you want to put it on so that you know, that recessed taper fits nice and snug and round on the ball. So I'm going to thread this into here. You can see the play in the wheel bearing just by screwing this thing on. I'm going to get it in there. Is it coming through yet? Yeah, it's just starting to now. You know what? I should get a wrench for this before I fire that on there so I know what size it is. Snug it up. Okay, ended up being a 24 mil. How we doing? We framed in here? Yeah, we're doing okay. Turn that a bit. So I'm just going to run it till it's flush on the inside here. Okay. Just going to snug it up with the wrench. Oh, I can't get it in there. I'm going to have to unscrew all this stuff just to do that, or what? Let's see. Maybe we can get it in there. Come on, wrench. Just not enough gap. Okay, let's just back these off a little bit so I can get the wrench in there. Okay. I'm just going to snug it up. You don't need it overly tight. It's just to take up the slack in the threads. I don't want to rip the threads out of the tool. Okay, it's going to get noisy. So basically all I'm going to do is just going to slide this back and bang it off the end of the tool as hard as I can. And hopefully that'll yank all that out. So here we go. And just like that. So as you can see, here's the inner race that got yanked out from the bearing. And this is actually a nice bearing. Oh, this is going to be easy to get it off of this hub. With the next special tool you got to buy. I'll show you guys that in a second. But sometimes the balls inside here go flying everywhere. So let me grab my phone here and I'll show you guys. So you can see all the balls in here. So at this point, if I have to, I can put it back together. I can use my bearing tool and I can pull that hub back on if I have to put the car back together. As you can see, I don't see the snap ring in here. So that means the snap ring's on the back side of this, which is going to be a bit of an issue. Because I'm going to have to swing the spindle right out of the way to get in behind there and clean that, because that's probably going to be rotted to heck in there. And let's have a close-up of this. As you can see, there's a groove here if the thing would focus. Let me take the light off here. See if it'll focus in. Come on. There it is. Okay, stay focused. And it's too shiny. Try getting rid of that. Anyways, there's a little groove right here in the bearing. I'm running my fingernail through it right now. Some of these bearings don't have it. In that case, to do what we're going to do, you need a grinder to grind a flat spot in the race to get this off. But we're going to do this last, because if I can't get the snap ring off on the spindle, I have to leave this together so I can put it back on the car. That's the joys of doing this at your storage unit without having, any other way of getting around besides, the bike. But it's freaking 3 degrees Celsius and I really don't want to have to do that. So let's have a look and see what we can do with this. Okay, let me get you guys back on the stand here. Throw the light back on. Okay, I'm going to crank the wheel far left and get this brought out into the open so we can see it. And hopefully, if I take this off and the ball joint, I can rotate all this out enough to get the CV axle out, and then I can do the rest of it on the car. I'm also going to do something with this caliper sitting here. I don't know if you guys can see it. Yeah, you can't see. I just got to hang on the strut. I'm going to move the caliper so hopefully it doesn't fall down when I'm doing this. Put the old gloves back on. Safety first, right? All right, crank the wheel. Now again, gotta save that cotter pin. And this one don't look near as fun as the other one was. But let's see, you never know. It might pop it out of there. If not, I brought some coat hanger from the house. If I have to run a piece of coat hanger through there, I will. Somebody flying over in a plane. Okay, yeah, this thing's rusted in there pretty good. Let's see if it turns at all. Oh boy. Alright, and as you can see, the cotter pin's in a really bad spot. I can't easily get in there to get anything on it because the heat shield's right in the way. Let me have a look and see. Okay, it's not moving. I give it a couple of light taps. Normally what I do is I just hammer a socket on and run it off with the gun. The gun will blast that right off, rip the cotter pin and everything. If you're changing the tie rod, alright, and you do that, you don't want to knock the actual tie rod out until you re-drill the hole where the cotter pin's all sheared off in there. It's really easy to drill when you do that because it, you know, it shears everything off and leaves a nice little divot you can get the drill bit into, and you can follow the hole really easily through. But if you knock this off, then it doesn't sit still and all that. So make sure if you're going to do it by hammering the socket on and then running it off with an impact gun, that you drill the hole before you take, you know, you knock the tie rod out of the spindle. All right, so I'm going to see if I can do something with this here, because I don't know how well this is going to go. And again, I want to save this cotter pin. Let me see if it's moving at all. There's a good chance it might be. If we can hook this screwdriver in there. Oh, that's never good for your brake lines. I know that this car has pretty good brake lines on it. They're still, you know, pretty flexible and they're not cracked or anything, but generally you don't want your caliper falling on your brake line. Come on, show me some love. Oh yeah, I think it's turning. Let's see. Unfortunately, I don't have the water. My bottle's frozen. So I'm kind of having to do this the very gentle way. Let's see if we can get some pliers in here again. Oh yeah, see, it's moving. Here, just a bit more. I might be able to wiggle it out. Yep, there she comes. There we go. Now I think this one's a 17 mil. I got that here somewhere. Maybe not. Oh, yeah, here it is. There we go. And when you put these on too, you don't need to reef them. You know, if you reef them on, it just makes it more of a chore to get the thing apart. It's tapered seat in there. You don't have to go very tight with it. Just snug is good enough. Oh. Now, you want to get this nut so that it runs on at least close to by hand, because what happens is, once you pop this apart and this is all loose, it might turn it's just a ball inside here in a seat is what allows this to pivot and the steering turns. So if this is tight to go on, it'll spin in the ball and there's no way to hold it. And you definitely don't want to get your vice grips on there because you'll wreck the taper and all that, or the threads, and then you're going to have a bad time. So this is actually not bad. I'm just going to run it on and off a couple of times by hand. If it was really sticky, I would get the water out, again with the water, and just put water on it and run it in and out. Then after it got really easy and all the rust was off, I would, you know, blow it off with air or something like that, or clean it off with a rag, and then throw a bit of oil on this, or grease when you put it together. So to get these guys out, I'm going to leave that nut on. Normally I come in here with an air hammer with a flat hammer end on it. Looks just like the end of this. I put an air hammer here and just vibrate it and it'll pop it out. You want to avoid going down if you can. If you're going to do it by hand, you got to be good, because if you hit this and rip the boot, as you can see, it's already ripped. I got to change this anyways, but if you rip the boot, then you got to change the tie rod end, because it's just going to rust out. Especially these style that are upside down on the spindle. The water just gets in there, sits on the bottom, and just rots it out. So we're going to give it a couple of wraps here and see if that pops down. I'm going to try not to hit the boot. See what happens. See if I can get a punch or something to put in there. I had one here. How did it go? All right, here we go. Old extensions. Don't throw them out. They come in handy for this kind of stuff. Now I'm going to try and do this without hitting the cell phone. I got a bigger hammer now too. And we'll see what happens here. There it goes. Okay. Must have hit the nut because it's a bit tight. Okay, it's coming off. Now that brake caliper is going to be a bit of an issue there. I have to move that. Ooh. Okay. Let's hang this somewhere else. Okay, you know what? Let me go grab a bungee cord. I think I got one around here somewhere. Just going to put it back up here for now. Go in the back of the car. See what I got for a short one. It'll be all 4 miles long. Yeah, it's a pretty long one. Maybe I can just coerce this into staying on the strut. That would be okay. I'll do that. Well, I think that should be okay for now anyways. This will keep it from falling on the brake hose. Now, I need to get my head in here. Sorry if you guys can't see. So the ball joint in these cars is actually really nice. They don't have that style where, you know, it's a tapered seat like this is. It's actually bolted to the bottom of the spindle, so you can get in there with a socket. And I think this one's a 17 mil. Yeah, 17 mil. And you'll see when I get the spindle out of the way that it's just a flat plate that bolts to the bottom of the spindle. Okay, let's throw this back in there for a quick second. Make life a little easier. Oh, and it's tight. Okay, let me grab a ratchet and a socket. Now, I don't think I can get the other one. I might be able to get the wrench in there just to loosen it. But it's right on top of the control arm. Yeah, it's coming loose. Okay, so that makes life a lot easier right there. Get a couple of turns on it. Now I can take this back out. Let me take this one off first. See if you guys are still framed in there. Yeah, you can kind of sort of see what I'm doing here. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm going to try and see if I can do this on the car. If not, I'll have to put a lot of this back in to get the strut bolts out. But we're going to try it and see what happens. And loosen this one down here. So once you get these bolts out, you want to be careful. There's a little bit of tension on the control arm. And it's basically just these rubber bushings trying to push the control arm up. So usually if you just lean on it, it gives you enough to get some space to work. So now we're going to push the CV axle out, and alas, we can do it on the car. I'm just going to turn this a bit. Now here's the unfortunate part. I have to move you guys because I'm right-handed. And this circlip is on this side, and thankfully it's in a good spot that I can get to it. So I'm going to move the phone over, and then I'll show you guys from this side. Okay, we're back. So this circlip, let's see if I can get a good lighting on it here. Okay, you see that? The two tangs, they're right between the wheel speed sensor. So there's a circlip that goes all the way around, holds that bearing in there. These things rust in like mad. And they're difficult to get out. Alright, this is probably going to be the biggest problem I'm going to have with the entire car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try it off camera. And basically all I'm going to do is I'll show you guys. I'm going to hook a... Let me see if I can put this light down, so you guys can see what the heck's going on here. I'm just going to get in here into the little groove. And this is a screwdriver, but I'm going to use a chisel. I'm just going to tap it and see if it'll move. All right, see if it pops out. And, you'll see a bunch of rust and stuff kind of fall out with it, and see if it moves a bit. And then I'll try the same on the bottom one. All right, you don't want to break these ends off. All right, or if it's got the little loop in it, you don't want to break that off. If you break that off, you're going to have a bad time getting this thing out. I ended up having to custom grind a chisel to get in behind here, and it took me about an hour and a half to grind it because I had to grind it into a specific angle with a special groove to... trust me, you don't want to break this. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to test it here. I'll videotape a bit of it, but if I start having problems with it, I'm probably going to shut the video off and do my trick, and I'll show you what that is with the water and the chisel and a hammer to get this thing loosened up so you can actually get it out of here. Alright, so that's what that looks like. Let me frame you guys up here. I'm going to try to, so it's somewhat in the middle of the frame. There we go. Okay. We'll throw some more gloves on. Okay, so what I got, just a small little ball peen hammer, just a small little guy, and a chisel where the head has been rounded off, so it's not sharp. Alright, you really don't want to break this thing. If I was doing this in a shop and had an air hammer or air tools, I'd basically just come straight in like this, and then just hammer all the way up with the snap ring, and dump water on there, and just keep rattling it. Just keep rattling it until you see all the rust and stuff comes out and this thing comes loose, and then I would test with the hammer. Just give it a couple of taps, and once it starts turning, then get in there with the pliers and get it out. So we're going to try this and see what happens here, if it moves at all. It doesn't look like it's going to. Let me try a different chisel. This one's not too bad. It's got kind of a blunted off end on it. It might be moving. Try this end, see if this end moves. I'm just tapping, I'm not wailing on it really hard. Yeah, it's not moving. Okay, so I'm going to get the water out and I'm going to douse with some water and I'm going to see if I can get that thing loose without having to take it off the car. Okay, good news. It didn't take too much. I just gave it a couple more wraps and it actually came loose. You can see the gap. Get this thing will frame in here. Come on, focus. It's gonna be stubborn. Anyways, you can see there's a little gap here. That's because the ring has popped out of its groove. So basically what's happening is as I hit it, it's springing back. I hit it and it springs back. So I'm gonna keep doing that a bunch of times and see if I can't get the whole ring to start spinning in the groove. Once it starts spinning, then I can keep going back and forth to loosen everything up, and then I should be able to get in there with vice grips or something and rip it out of there. So let's give that a shot and see what happens here. It looks to me like it's turning, so I'm going to go back to this side now. This side's a bit rounded off, so I might need to use a sharper chisel. Again, I'm going to try not to break the end of that off. Just want to go nice and light. Okay, it's not moving yet, so I'm going to keep going on this side and just keep rattling the rust out. So basically by doing this, I'm actually cleaning the groove as I do it. So it'll make it a lot easier to get this out after. Okay, now it's going. You hear the change in the sound? There, it's turning now. As you can see, it's actually pretty much out of the groove. I can probably get a screwdriver in there. I hope you guys can see this. Yeah, so I can get the screwdriver in there. Okay, make sure you got your safety glasses on for this because these things fly and you pry them out. And wash your fingers because it hurts the fingers too. I just broke my screwdriver. Okay, let's get a small chisel. And I still have that special chisel here. Okay, you guys want to see the special chisel to get these things out if you break the ends off? That's the special chisel I had to make. And there's actually I've cut a special little groove in here so that when you get it under the ring, it'll lift the ring up and out at just the right angle that you can twist it out of there without without it binding. And it took me quite a while to make this thing, grinding and trying, but I got it done. So as you can see how much I had to grind off on a bench grinder. Took quite a bit of time, but we'll give it a shot and should work for us here. If I didn't break my screwdriver, I wouldn't be doing this, but you know, things happen. So I'm just going to get this hooked under here and I'm going to run it around and try and pop the front end of that out. So once I get the front end out, I can get something in there to hold it. Let's see if it'll come out. Oh yeah, here it comes. I'm going to try that again. If I can quit hitting my thumb. Okay. There we go. So I can use the broken screwdriver now. Now, I'm gonna try not to wreck this snap ring. I do have a new one. I got one with the bearing, just in case I end up having to, you know, breaking this thing or something. There we go. It's reusable. Clean all that rust and stuff off, and it'll no problem. All right, now I'm guessing that this wheel bearing hasn't been changed in a long time. I changed the wheel bearing on this car once before, and I can't remember what side it was. I think it might have been this one. And I didn't have all these tools to do this job, so I just ended up buying the whole spindle from a scrapyard and taking a gamble on the bearing that came in it. So I just threw the whole spindle on and said, okay, that's what I'm going to go with, because I didn't have tools to do the wheel bearing anyways. And probably why I'm doing this again so soon, because I think I did it about 1.5 years ago. I did a wheel bearing that way. And this is probably the one. So hopefully that bearing comes out fairly easily with our bearing presser tool. So let's have a look at that. Clean the hands off a little bit here. Okay, again, got this off of Amazon. This is our bearing press tool. It's got all kinds of different attachments for different bearings. You just select the one you need for the bearing. I'm going to show you guys which one I'm going to use and why we're using that and how it fits. How to properly press a bearing so you don't actually damage the bearing when you're doing it. Obviously, the old one that's in there, we don't care much about because it's garbage, right? But we want to make sure we do it right so we can actually get it out of there without wrecking the tool, because we have to use it to put it back in. So let me get the bearing, the new one. Okay. So this part's important. I'm going to show you guys here. Very important. Okay. Oops. Sorry. So there's our new bearing. Okay. So what you have on a bearing here, this inner ring here, you see the little, I wish this thing would focus better. Let me see if there's dirt on there. No, there's not. Anyways, if you look at the bearing, this inner steel, usually there's number stampings on it. I'm going to try and get this to focus. Let me try something better here. Maybe on the paper. Let me see here. You going to focus in or what? If I pause. Okay, well I just had it focused. There we go. So this here, let's see if I can do this. I'm trying to look in the phone and do this. This is the inner race here. Okay. So this is that part on the spindle that I showed you guys earlier that's going to be easy to pull off. As you can see, it wraps all the way around inside to here. You see that little line there? That's the end of this side of the bearing, the inner race of the bearing. And the other side looks just like this, butts up against it. This is what sets your clearance on the bearing. And this is why I say you don't have to worry too much about those CV axle nuts being, you know, how tight you put them, as long as they're tight. Because once this crushes, you can't over torque the bearing in a front wheel drive car. Alright? So this becomes important when you're pressing. Alright? And we'll go into that when I'm using the tool. This kind of shady gray or dull gray area, this is the seal. Okay, it's a metal seal is in here. Alright, and this really thin, you can see the black lip here, and this thin steel here, this is the outer race. Okay, so when you're pressing bearings, it's very important that you make sure when you're pressing that when you press it into the spindle, you have to press on this little edge. Alright, usually you can use the old bearing that you take out to press against this, but you have to pop the inner race out. Well, as you can see, the old one, the inner race came out with it anyways. But you don't want to press on the inner race if you're trying to push the outer race into the spindle. You have to press on the side that has the friction. Okay, and then same when you're putting the hub back in, and you're trying to press the stem through the middle here, you have to now hold the inner race on the other side to pull all that together. If you don't do that, you'll wreck the balls in there, or you'll put dents in the raceways. Just to kind of put it in perspective, you know, like the car only weighs maybe, this car is like 2,500 pounds or something. So there's maybe 250 pounds in a wheel bearing when you're driving, you know, for the four corners of the car. And then to press these things into the spindle is probably 6 or 8 tons of force, which is 12 to 16,000 pounds. So yeah, you can damage the balls or the raceway in here if you're not careful how you press. So I'm going to turn this up sideways, and then the tool I need, I'm going to turn the autofocus back on, is this thing here. I'm pretty sure this is the right one. Let me have a look here. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay, so if you look at this tool that comes with it, as you can see, it's got a groove here. Okay, this nub sticking out, this is what goes inside the bearing. It'll fit in where the CV goes to sit flat. And if you look at it closely, you can see it sits flat right on the outer race. Let's see if I can get this to focus again here. There you go. Make it a little closer. As you can see, it's a bit smaller, but it fits right on the outer race and it fits flush. Okay, this is so you make sure that you're pushing on the right spot when you're pressing all this together. Alright, so definitely worth having to do this right. If you're doing this on a hydraulic press at a shop or something, you can always just use the old bearing to get it started. And then obviously it's a bit smaller, so it fits into the lip. There's a lip in the spindle that holds this bearing from going too far, so this tool has to fit in there. So let me get that set up and we'll have a look. So this is my first time actually using this tool in the car. So that one's not going to fit there. I have to use a different one to push this bearing out. That one might be too small, because it won't fit inside the lip there. And I don't want to use the... Okay, this one will work. Yeah, that'll work. It's going to pull up on the balls a little bit that are in there, but that's okay. Now, let's make sure we got the proper ring here that the bearing can slide into. And is this ball joint going to be a problem? Let's have a look-see. It might be in the way a little bit here. Let's see if I can overlap that. So this bearing has to come this way. So we're going to put the tool in the back, and this ring seats up against the spindle and allows the bearing to get pulled into the inside of here. As you can see by the... Okay, I guess we're using one bigger ring then, because it won't fit in that one. This might be too big though. Yeah, it's a little bit too big. I might have to use the smaller one and then hammer the bearing out later. It just barely doesn't fit. But the thing is, we don't want that going in there then not coming out. So that would be a bad time for everybody. If I can push it in by hand, I think it would be good to take it out. Yeah, it won't go in there. I have to use the big one. Alright. This is going to be an adventure, I think. Okay, you know what? I'm going to use the small one first to get it moving. And then once it's going, I'll switch to the big ring. That's what I'm going to do. Alright. So, I need this. I'm going to put a washer on. And I'm going to grab some grease and put some grease in the threads so that it turns nice and easy. Just a little bit. I need a whole bunch. Okay. Now, where'd that tool go that we need? I think it was this small one. Yeah, that small one. Put that on like that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it the other way. I'm going to build this the other way so I got lots of room. So what we need is, we need our ring. And we need a collar that fits that ring. So it's one of these guys. So it's just a stepped. Okay. Just sits in the ring like that, holds it snug. We put our bolt through like that. All this goes in through the bearing. And watch out for a wheel speed sensor there. Okay, so it's nice and flat. Take our smaller diameter tool, throw it on the back. And then I'm going to take another washer. And then we got this fancy big nut that goes on there. And thread it on there. Now, this is my first time ever using one of these tools, so we'll see how it works out. Hopefully it goes without a hitch. Okay. Oh. Need a socket. What size socket do I need? It'd be nice if this one fits. Nope. Oh, maybe just barely. Let me try turning this around. Maybe just the end of it's just buggered up a little bit. It'd be nice if this thing was the same size as the CV nut. It's close enough. Just have to put it on the other way. And the threads won't reach. All right. Guess we're going this way. I might have to coerce it. Yeah, just the end of the nut was screwed up a little bit. There we go. Slides on now. Okay, I have to go this way because I need the threads as close as possible to get this on there. Okay, I'm going to get this centered up there as close as I can. Okay, so that's on there. Now the 24 is too small for that. It's probably the same as that, 1.25 inches. And I think I have one. It's a 1 inch. 1 1/16. I don't want to have to go at this with the 1 1/16. Look at that. Okay. So that's sweet. I can use a breaker bar and the 1/2 inch ratchet down there to hold this. I can only get it in there now, but CV axle's right in the way. Let's get the light out of there. Can you guys still see? Yeah, you can still see. Okay, I'm trying to rip the CV boot here doing this, but I want it up out of the way a little bit. Okay. So I'm just going to leave this breaker bar against the ground. I'm going to do everything on this end with the ratchet. Let me see if I can get you guys a little bit better of a view there. Okay. Here we go. A buddy of mine used one of these before. He said they work really good. I guess we'll find out in a minute how good it really is. Okay, we're just basically crushing the seal in right now. Okay, now we're getting there. I think it may have moved. That, or I broke something and we're in a lot of hurt now. Because there's no way it should be that easy. Okay, we gotta take it apart and have a look, because something's definitely not right here. Yeah, it's kind of what I figured happened. Looks like it popped the inner race out. Yeah, it did. Okay, so okay, but this tool looks like it's going to catch up on the end, I think. Take that out. Okay. Let me get these freaking parts out of here. Put this back in. Oh, it's gonna go right through. Now we could be in a world of hurt here, guys. I wonder if that inner race will catch up on that. No. Oh boy, that's not a good thing to have happen. Okay. So, our only other option is to try and put some of these bearings back in. Some of these balls. Okay, I guess I should have took the inner race off of there first and put it inside here to push all this out. So what I'm going to do is, I thought for sure the tool would have caught. So I'm going to put some of these balls back in here. Just in the inner race on the inside. And then pop this in. Like that. There you go. That should do it. Okay. Let's try this again. A little scared for a second there. I think we'll be all right now. That one's too big. Where's that small one? Yep, that small one's going to be perfect. Okay. All right. Put our ring back on. Our tools back in. And use the flat side of this. So the bearing's obviously destroyed now, so we're SOL if I can't do this, meaning I can't put the car back together now to drive it anywhere. So hopefully this comes out, and if it doesn't, I guess I'm going for riding the bike to a shop to use a hydraulic press to get this out. I think my buddy's working today anyways, so try this again. I think it's going to work this time though. I'm pretty confident. Oh, why is that not centered? So this ball joint in the way? Is that what's keeping it up like that? Yeah, let's move that over a bit. There we go. That and the CV axle's kind of right in the freaking way too. Which don't make life very nice. Get that centered up. Okay, let me swap all this around. Hang on a second. I'm gonna swap all this around. Okay, so basically all I did was I tied up the CV shaft here so it quits falling down. I flipped this collar over. There's a little step here. It's slightly smaller than that area there. I just flipped that over so it's the bigger areas against the spindle. And this looking doodad in the back on this side, I had it flipped with the flat side against the inner race. I flipped it over and put the tapered or the stepped out side in the inner race. It fits right inside. That's to keep everything centered up as I try and do this. It's kind of critical you go straight with it, right? So we're gonna give it a shot now and see what happens. breaker bar back on. Okay, here goes nothing. I think it's coming out. It's going somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit further. Okay, I just got it hard, so I think we're probably bottoming it on this. So let's have a look in there and see if it's coming out. Again, we don't want to screw the tool up so we can't use it to put the new one in. And yes, the bearing is definitely coming out. That's a good sign. Actually, quite surprised how freaking well that thing worked. Okay, as you can see, let me grab my pointing thing here. The bearing is now out and flush. All right, so I'm gonna put the bigger ring on now because it's coming really easy. We don't have to worry about damaging it. Trying to get the rest of the way out. So just a bigger ring now, this bigger tube. Put that back in there. I'm gonna try and get it close to centered up. It doesn't fit exactly flat, but because it's all started now, it should be okay. Put that back on there. I'm actually quite impressed at how well this is working. I didn't think it'd be that easy because you do this on a hydraulic press at the shop or something. It's like, holy Christ, it feels like there's a lot of force there. Okay. Okay, you can see it's pulling it in. Yeah, okay, it's going. I could feel it in the wrench. So, if you want an idea of how much torque I'm putting on, I'm just going to back off my torque wrench here. And I'll see where it clicks and how much force. And then from that, I'll be able to tell you how much it actually took to break it loose. I'd say maybe 120 foot-pounds to break it loose. Jesus, not even... Keep going some more. Okay, there it's clicking. Find out where it is. Okay, so that is, it's taking 45-ish foot-pounds to press it out. So maybe it took 100 to break it loose. So if you're reefing on the thing, trying to get it to come out, you might want to have a look and see what's going on in there. So don't go ape crazy with, you know, the 4 foot long breaker bars. On the hydraulic press, you know, cars that have never been changed before, you know, all the cars I've worked on, they always seem to be about the same to get them to break loose. You get the odd one that's a little more, but it's not like an insane amount. And given how much force it took to break this loose, I'd say if you're cranking much more than 100 foot-pounds, 150 max on this wrench, there's something probably not right. You're not pressing something right. So just kind of keep that in mind. You don't want to break the tool, right? Because this is, you know, this is one of these jobs that if you only got one car, it has to get done. There's no option, right? And there we go. It just popped out. Okay. So I'll take that off. I take that off. So aside from having that little mishap at the beginning there with the, you know, pulling the inner race out and all that kind of stuff, and having to basically put the balls back in it, we were able to get it out. And yeah, I was a little panicky there for a second, but you know what? It all worked out. Just take your time and think about the problem, and usually fix it. Just gonna throw this together so I don't lose all the stuff. Get the ring out, and there it is. I'm quite impressed at how well that worked. Quite impressed. Okay, so clean up. It's the best part of doing a job like this, isn't it? Clean everything up. Okay, stay in there, spindle. Oh, let's go like this. I should put that one bolt back in. Maybe that'll... See if I can put this bolt in the bottom of the ball joint here. It might give us a hand keeping everything a little more stable, maybe. Maybe if I'm lucky. Somebody bought me a coffee today in the Tim Hortons drive-thru, so maybe it'll be a good day and this will make life easier. Oh, come on. No, it's gonna be stubborn, isn't it? Where's the hole? There it is. Oh, it moved again. Okay. Not gonna waste a bunch of time with that. That won't fit in there. Oh, maybe it will. I just want something just to hold the damn thing from moving around so much. Put that special punch in there. There we go. Okay. So I'm gonna go grab a pick. I think I even have like a screwdriver that I bent the end over on to scrape this groove out. Let's go see what that thing is. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is sort of a special pick that I made. It's basically just an old pick that I ground the end on to make it kind of pointy and like a, you know, it's like flat, right? It's not pointy, it's like a flat screwdriver end almost. And that allows me to get into these cracks and stuff and scrape all that rust out of there. So I don't have any issues putting the new snap ring in. And I'm going to fill this groove with grease too once I get ready to put everything together. Obviously going to put grease over the bearing and I put it in. So let me clean this up. I'm going to clean here and I'm going to clean it in the back too where the bearing bottoms out so that I know for sure the bearing's in there flat and even. I'm not going to have any problems with crooked bearings or anything like that. Alright, so let me clean this up and I'll bring you guys back in. Just a quick note, way to tell if it's clean or not is I'm using my special punch that I made right now. This is pretty thick stuff in here. When it's clean, it'll sound like that, like it's just scraping. If there's still rust there, it'll sound kind of squeaky. Listen to this. And it sticks. That's how you know there's still a bunch of rust in there. And once you get it all cleaned out, it'll sound more scrapey like it does down here. See? Not squeaking as much anymore. And that's how you tell it's good and clean, and it's fresh steel. The less junk there is in here, the less quickly it'll all rust up and cause your problems next time, especially if you lube this stuff when you put it in. You put grease in there to keep this from rusting as bad. If you ever have to do this again, and we all know that wheel bearings don't last forever, next time it might go a little easier for you. So just something to keep in mind. Ladies and gents, we're back. I got all this stuff cleaned up here. As you can see, there's no more rust in there. Nice and clean. And I decided I'm going to go with the new circlip. I'm going to save the old one in case I run into problems, so I don't have to clean it all up and stuff. So I'm going to try and get this one in there. Usually the new ones are, you know, pretty far expanded over the size of the hole because they're brand new, right? They haven't been sitting and squeezed in for, you know, a number of years. So we're going to use this one. Just going to take it out of the bag here. So the first thing we're going to do is, we got the bearing here. Get some grease. You want to lube these guys when you put them in. So I'm just going to take a thin smear, just regular, you know, grease, anything you can find. Just going to smear inside the housing here. Just really light coating. And that'll help keep the bearing from rusting itself in there for, you know, next time you have to do this. I'm not going to worry about the groove yet. I just want to do inside here, because I'm going to load that groove up when I get the bearing in there. And I'm going to do the same with the wheel bearing. Just a thin coat. You don't have to go crazy with it. You know, it's interference fit, right? So just going to end up squeezing a lot of this stuff out anyways. Just like that. Okay, so it's got a thin coat of grease. And then we're going to press it in from this side, and we're going to use that tool to pull it back in. So the proper attachment now is the one I showed you way earlier. This is the one that fits like that. Just a little lip there, but it catches on the outer race and not the inner. Again, because we're pressing this outer race, into the spindle. All right, so the friction is going to be on the outside race. We need to make sure that that's where we're pressing when we put this bearing in. All right, so let me get the tool set up here. I'm going to put this bearing and tool here. And take this all apart. So this is the old one we used. We don't need that small one anymore. Just going to clean it up here before I put it back in the kit. Oh, looks like the paint is not the highest quality in the world, but you know what? It did the job. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this through there like that, and then through like that. And on this side, we're just going to use that same triple taper thing that we had that collar on. You know what, maybe I'll put the collar on too. It'll save me having to thread so much. Where's that collar? So here's the collar. I'm going to see if it fits here in the back and fits flush. It's a little bit too big, so I'm going to use a smaller one. It's just going to save me from having to use the smaller one. It'll save me from having to run the nut all the way in. Actually, let me see. It might be better to go without it. Just because everything's closer together, it'll pull straight in. Where is that thing? There it is. If we can do it that way, yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to put this on with the flat side facing the spindle. So it's going to go on the back just like that. I'll try and get my arm out of the way here so you can see it. Okay, washer, and put the nut on. I can see the bearing's not set. I'm just going to get this all installed here first. And then I'll deal with the bearing in a second here. Okay, how's it look? Okay. So there we go. Now we're going to pull that bearing in. So we should expect probably the same amount of torque to pull it in, around 30 foot-pounds. I'll set the wrench up for that. And then once you hit about, I'd say probably about 100, and you want to stop 150 maybe, because then you know for sure it's bottomed out. So I'm going to set this to 40, we'll set it to 50. And we'll see what happens here. We'll see how she feels. Okay, the bearing's going in, and we haven't even hit 50 foot-pounds yet. It's really easy to pull it in. Yeah, it's just sliding right in. It's not even clicking the ratchets. The ratchet almost goes down on its own. So let's see. Keep going. Should get tighter as we go. Yeah, it's starting to get a little tighter now. Still nothing terrible. Like, it's literally no force on the ratchet. And that's what you want. You don't want it to be crooked. If it's really hard, it's going crooked. You don't want to do that either. Really easy. Like, there's literally like no force there. Maybe 20 foot-pounds right now. Let's see. Okay, a little more than that. Okay. Let's see if we can get the click here. Okay, so that is... It's 30 foot-pounds. That's what it's taken to go in, 30. So I'm going to turn this back up a little bit. Still the same, about the same 30 foot-pounds. I think the wrench is set at 60 right now. Well, that's not very good. Let me try and stick that back on the car. I'm obviously going to probably try and trim that out. I'll stay. Okay. So it's set at 60. It's getting a little harder now, not much. Oh, okay, it just stopped. So there's 60. To make sure, I'm going to crank this up to about 100 and just give it a cinch. Just to make sure it's fully bottomed out. Okay, there's 110. Okay, went a little bit more. So that bearing's probably all the way bottomed out. And I'm just going to give it a little tweak. Yep, it's in there. Okay, so the bearing's all the way in. Now, if we cleaned up in behind there really well, we should have no problems getting that snap ring to fit into its groove. We'll have a look here in a second and see what it looks like. See, the problem now is once you put it in, it's a good chance you'll destroy it trying to get it back out if you mess something up, because you'll have to press on that inner race on this side this time to get it out, and then there's no saying if you damage the balls or the race or not. So this is a one-way trip for this bearing. Once it's in there, it's got to stay in there until it burns out, or otherwise you're going to buy another one. And I can tell by how the groove looks in here that we most likely got it all the way in. I'll try and get the phone in here so you gotta have a good look at it. I got it on charge right now, so let me see if I can get it to focus here. There you go. Oh, there we go. You can see that it's just sitting right flush with the groove. So if you had any dirt or anything in there, and that bearing wasn't all the way in, you'd have a heck of a time getting the snap ring in there. Oh, and you can see really good in this picture. See this line in the middle of the bearing? These are actually two separate inner races. And this is precision ground so that you can't clamp this bearing together any more than it's supposed to go to get the proper ball clearance in there. You can see I'm turning the outside, this inside one, and the outside one's not turning, because these are two separate races. Alright. So I'm going to try and get that snap ring in. Should be lots of fun. I got snap ring pliers, so we'll give them a shot. I think they're in the back of the car. I don't know how well these are going to work. Just Princess Auto ones. But we'll give them their time in the limelight and we'll see what happens. Let's try the angled ones. Okay, again with the safety glasses, you want to have your safety glasses on doing this, because these things, yeah, I think these will work okay. Alright, so let's get our grease. I'm just going to fill up that groove in here. And it doesn't matter if you get it all over the bearing. Nothing's going to get in there because it's all, the bearing's sealed. I just want to make sure that we have lots in that groove so the snap ring sits in there nice and snug, and hopefully doesn't rust out too much for the next time I got to do this. Okay, let's take this ring and we'll throw some grease on here too. This is the messiest way to do it, but you know what? It really saves you on days like today when you're doing this out in the cold and, you know, gravel and stuff like that. Clean up my hands here so I don't get my pliers all dirty. Okay, we're gonna give this a shot with these snap ring pliers I bought at Princess Auto. I mean, the handles aren't the best, but that's what we got rags for. Okay, let's try to lose our eyeballs doing this. Oh, look at it, went in nice too. Okay, now they're stuck a bit in there. Okay, now you take that chisel that I showed you way earlier, the one with the rounded off end. And of course, I don't know where the heck it went. Was here a few minutes ago. And you just take your rounded off chisel end and you just tap the snap ring straight in and it'll pop into its groove. There it goes. Just very gently, you don't want to hit the bearing or the bearing seal or anything. Okay, and to make sure that it's actually in there, what you can do is, let's move this control arm down a bit so we can get our hands in there. You can take that same, I'm going to use the pointier one, but I'm just going to gently tap backwards to basically spread it open into the groove. Again, just being careful not to actually hammer on the seal. Try and get that in there. Okay, let's have a look-see. Looks like it's in there to me. I think we're golden. I'm just going to give it a closer look with a flashlight here and just make sure. So you don't want that coming out. Yeah, it's in there. Okay, and if you like the idea of the grease, I'm going to get some new gloves. Give me a second. Hold your grease. If you like the idea of the grease, what you can do is to really seal her up, give her another smear right on top of that thing. Alright, well, there you go. Nice gloves. Smear it right on top. Okay, so a little bit of grease in the middle. Just a little bit. Might as well do this here while I'm here also. Grease up these splines. And that too. Some in the cotter pin holes if I can get it in there. There, that's done. Okay, so next. Oh, sorry guys. I realized it wasn't focused. There we go. So I greased up, you know, the CV shaft and the snap ring. I'm gonna grab another glove, because next we're gonna pull that inner race off the hub now. Okay, so let's see if I can get this phone moved here so you guys can see this. Okay, we're going to try and do this with the phone pointing straight down. You're obviously stuck to the fender of the car. I'm going to see what we can do here. If I can get you guys a good view. Okay, so we need to get all this stuff off. Just lump it all together. I mean, why not, right? That there. And I'll show you guys the next tool you're going to need also. They call it a bearing splitter or a bearing separator. And I'll show you the box. I got this particular tool from Napa, and that's so we can get this inner race off. You'll see when we do it what it looks like here. Bearing separator right here. Okay, get that out of the way. Oh, come on, focus in. Okay, it's going to be stubborn. No, I want the autofocus. There you go. Okay, so that's the Napa part number if you want to get it. And that's what it looks like. Oop. Alright, so what we're going to do is we'll probably try this one right here and see if it'll fit. This little guy. Alright, and you're going to need this T thing with its associated bolt. And then we'll need a couple of these adapter pieces here also to tie all this together. It'll look like this as we try and pull that bearing race off. You guys will see it. I'm going to move this kit out of the way now. We'll get to it. And this little one will work just fine. So if you remember that groove I was telling you about, you can see it really good if I hold it up. There's a groove here. This puller should fit right in that groove. If I can stop this from spinning for a second here. Okay. So that's the plan anyways, is hook that thing in that groove. You know, and tighten these nuts down to clamp it on there. And then put the T-bar on and pull it off. You guys will see it as I do. I'm going to try and do it right here in front of the camera. Just snug these up by hand for now. Try and get this even also. You know, the gentler you are with these kinds of tools, the better luck you're gonna have with it. You know, make sure everything's nice and straight. Need another wrench. I got a 14 here. And a 13. Okay, that one's not turning. How about this one? Yeah, it's turning on that end. Okay, let me grab another wrench. You want to snug this up pretty good. All right, you don't want it pulling out of that that groove that it's in there, because you're really just catching the edge. I wonder if maybe I should try the bigger one. See if it fits the groove better. Let's give it a shot. Oh, you know what? Let me lay this over top and see what it looks like. Yeah, this one will still catch on the edge too. Okay, we'll try the small one. If it ain't looking so hot, then we'll stop. Now, so, how do we press on that hole? Well, I think I'm going to use a socket. Use a socket to take up that gap. I have an adapter here that I was going to use. Actually, maybe this will work. Yeah, I don't know about that. That'll work. But I don't want to jam that thing in there. I kind of wish they gave you a cap for it, but you know what? I think I have one. I do. Okay. Okay, so I was lucky. I have a 3-arm puller that has this little, you know, pintle cap that you put on for it to roll on. So I'm just going to use this on here so I don't jam this into the socket. And that should make our life pretty fantastic. Where is that socket? Where did it go? Either I'm blind or I took it back with me. Oh, here it is. Okay, and again, the socket needs to be a little bit smaller than obviously the center of the hub itself, so the bearing can pull right off of it. I'm going to use that guy. Back this right out, like that. And then these ones will do it. So you thread these extenders in. I'll show you this one here. Where is it? So there it is. This end threads into the down here, and then this end just fits. If you split the washers, goes in like that. All right. And this doesn't really have to be tightened up either. Like you just run them in finger tight. I'm gonna put the 2 washers on top because that's where the force is going anyways. Nope. Stay centered. Okay. Yeah, 2 washers for sure. These aren't exactly the best washers in the world, but you know what? Okay, 1 washer because the nut's not going to go on all the threads. Actually, you know what? Maybe I got more room here to go down. No, that's bottomed out. Okay, so I have to use 1 washer. Such is life, I guess. Okay, I'm just going to even these nuts up because I want them. Okay, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to run these nuts now because they're not going all the way on the threads. And the last thing you want to do is rip the freaking threads off the tool, because then you're back to square one. Okay, a couple of turns here. Oh, that's not straight. Well, maybe it'll go if I tighten this up. Let's see. Is it an 18? Yeah, of course it's an 18. No job's ever complete unless you need every freaking tool in your toolbox to do it. Let's see if that's going to center up. It might not. Yeah, okay, I have to loosen that back off and center all this up first. Just a little bit. Center the socket. Get that started. Let's see how it looks here. It's a little bit crooked. I wonder why. Where's that 18 right here? I wonder if I should go the longer one. Are these longer? Yeah, these are a bit longer. Okay, we're gonna go with the longer ones. Just to save the headache. I was making for a long video, but you know what? Last time I checked, YouTube has like a fast forward button, so I'm sure some people appreciate seeing this kind of stuff. Those that don't, fast forward. Alright, get this off of here. Let's go with the longer ones. Is that framed in for you guys? Yeah. Is it focused? Of course not. Okay, now we can run this out a whole bunch. Actually, I like that better. It's gonna goes all the way down. Yeah, I like that much better. These longer ones are gonna be better. Now, before we tighten all that up, let's center all this stuff up. Looks pretty good. Snug these so it doesn't move around. Okay, so keep an eye here. I'm going to try and do this without wiggling around too much, but you know it is on the ground. Let's see if it'll pull it off. Let me grab a pry bar or something to stick in there so I don't have to, oh, let's use a wrench. Hopefully it doesn't pop that off center. Yeah, it might. Okay. I'm trying to do this in frame so you guys can see it, but it may prove to be more difficult. Oh, there it goes. So you can see it's making a gap already. See the gap there? So it's working. I can pipe, turn it by hand just like this. And you see the gap? And it's not too bad now. Just that initial breaking it loose takes a bit of force, but once you get it, like butter. Okay, I'm gonna run this off. There it is. Like gravy. I'm quite surprised at how well that worked too. Take all this stuff apart. I might leave that, I'll put it back in the toolbox with the other puller. That thing worked pretty good. Alright. Take all this stuff apart. Why are you getting stuck? There we go. Alright, I think these are 14s also. There she is. That's what you need. So maybe all in all about, I think this bearing splitter kit, it cost me 160 bucks or something. I bought this a while back. We're doing, these things work great if you're using a hydraulic press. You know, same deal. You can use these in a hydraulic press. You just put your, you know, your stuff in there like I had. And then you just sit this in your press in like some half circles or something like that, and then you can just press through the center with a hydraulic press. And these things, you know, aside from heating this thing up red hot with the torches to try and get it off, which is always a joke if it got stopped at the end, definitely worth it. Bearing spreaders. Bearing splitter, bearing separator. Took me a while to find them from Napa, but I did find it. So there's the name again. I know it's upside down, but let me try and get it focused up here. So that's the Ultra Pro one. I'm sure you can find them on Amazon. Okay, let's go back in there. Now, I can press this hub in. So, it's still fairly oily under there, so you know what? We'll let that go the way it is. A little bit of dirt in here. So we're going to use our tool again, this guy, and we're going to use this same end. So now what we're going to do is we're going to flip this end over. Alright, so we're holding the inner race in the bearing. You guys can't see. I'm going to move the camera in a second, but you'll see it when I move it. We now have to support the inner race in the bearing, because this is going to press in to the inner race of the bearing on the other side. So we have to hold it so that we don't wreck the balls inside the bearing as we press all this in, or pop the inner race out on the inside of the spindle. So let me get the camera switched around, and we'll have a go at that. Okay, we're back. Hands were getting cold with the other gloves, so I put something a little warmer on. Alright, we're going to press in the hub into the bearing assembly. So, you grab the phone here. When you look at the bearing, you can see that the... see if we can get a focus going on here. I need a pokey stick. There we go. You can see that the inner race is a little bit further out than the outer. So we're going to put a tool in here that'll support that inner race as we press in. As I look at it now, the one that's on there is not going to work because it's going to hit the snap ring because it's, you know, such a big bore. So we're going to use this smaller one. It should fit in behind that snap ring, and it does. So it fits right in behind the snap ring and it goes right against the inner race. We're going to use this guy with the, you know, the nubby end pointing in, and that'll help keep all this centered up. Now the thing is, I might have to actually, it might not be enough. I'm actually, okay, I changed my mind. I'm going to put it the flat side in. The reason for that is if this spindle end, where is it, right here, goes in too far into that bearing, it might hit this end. As it, you know, pulls it in, it might hit. And then I'll end up having to take it all apart, flip it over anyways. So I'll just put it in backwards anyways, so that we're against the inner race of the bearing, like that. It sits pretty close. It's pretty close to centered. And then this thing's going to center it up anyways with the tool I put on the outside to pull all that in. So let me get the camera back on its mount here and get the focus going. There we go. and then we'll see what we're gonna do with our tool here. So let's see what we got. Take this all apart. I'd like something that'll center all this up. Maybe this one will do it. It'd be nice if it would. Yeah, that's not too bad. So all I'm gonna do is just use this, the original one I used for pushing the bearing in. Just gonna put it on the outside like that. Actually, I'm gonna go from the inside. So flat side towards the bearing without the dirt, hopefully. Like that. Put that in through there. And then our hub. And then get that close to centered. Like that. And then this guy. And I'm going to put the nubby end in, just so it helps center up on the hub out here. Like that. Washer. And the big nut. And then the same thing as I did with the rest of them. I'll set the torque wrench so you get an idea how much torque should be on this when you put it in, like how hard it should be to turn it. And we can turn this around and make sure it's somewhat straight. Torque wrench. Turn this down to maybe 30 again. Okay, there's 30. There's 30 foot-pounds on the torque wrench. Now as I go, I'm gonna try and get that centered up. I think it's a little bit off. We'll see if it centers itself, and hopefully it will. Yeah, it's pulling it up. Yep, it's going centered. And again, 30 foot-pounds, and it's not even clipping the ratchet yet. Oh, this is almost like I probably do this by hand. Really close, but not quite. Now the nice thing about this is, if you don't get it all the way in, then your tool won't allow you to get the bearing all the way in. As long as your CV axle will fit, and you can get the nut on, you can pull it in with the CV axle. It'll pull the bearing together. That's why I'm not a huge fan of doing the 250 foot-pounds. We're going to find out in a second how much it actually takes to pull this in. Well, I'm doing it right now, and it's less than 30. So, okay, now it's getting a little snugger. So, you know what? You're probably okay at 250 on your CV shaft to pull the bearing together and tight. Okay, there's 30. It just bottomed out. So I'm going to go to 100 again on the torque wrench. Okay, 110. 110 foot-pounds. I'd say that's probably bottomed out. Okay. And this setup right here is basically your CV shaft and nut assembly. So just pretend that this hub was here. That's exactly how it works. It pulls this end of the shaft into the bearing. You put the nut on the other side, and it clamps the bearing together inside, and that gives you your proper spacing. So basically the CV shaft is exactly the same as what this tool is right now. Now obviously it's not long enough to pull the hub on. You'd have to use a longer tool like this to get it on there. But once you get it started, once you can get this nut on, the CV shaft can pull it all together, keep the hub and everything and all the inner races and everything tight. So there you go. That is that. Take this tool off. Oh, let's not do that too much. I'm just looking at the ABS wire up here. Well, this car doesn't have ABS, but the wheel speed sensor wire is it's pretty on the snug side. Be careful with that. Not exactly sure what would happen if I wrecked that wire, because the car doesn't even have ABS, but I want to find out today. So there you go. Quite happy with how well that tool worked. It was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I was a little concerned with the coarse thread on the bolt here. I'm like, oh, freaking coarse thread. You know, you gotta put a lot more force on the the bolt itself to break stuff loose, but I guess not that hard to press the bearing. I'm quite impressed. Okay, I'm going to clean these tools up and put them away. I don't need them anymore. And then we're going to start putting the rest of this back together. So give me a couple. Okay, we're back. We're just getting ready. As you can see, I took the bungee cord off the CV shaft just to hang it down. I'm going to put the CV back in the spindle hub here, obviously with the line that splines up. And this is what actually drives the tire. You want to pay attention to your holes. Okay, where the cotter pin goes. Because if you get it just right, you'll line the stupid thing up with the it's not so bad with cotter pins, but if you got the one that has the stake nut, it's so where's that stupid nut? You get some of these that don't have the holes for a cotter pin. It's just like a round ring, and then basically you take a punch and a hammer and you knock it over into a groove in here. Well, if you happen to get it just right, the stud will be right in the way, and you can't hit it straight, and it gets to be a real pain in the butt to get the thing on there. So, and then with the cotter pin, if you got to hit it with a hammer or something, or tap it or whatever, it's nice to not have the holes lined up with the wheel stud. So just pay attention to that when you put it in. It's not a huge deal, but you know, it's just something to frustrate you later. So I think I didn't mention either too, when you're working with CV shafts, there's a little bit of play in them. Okay, they're supposed to slide in and out of the. There's an inner hub similar to this one's a little longer, but it's designed to slide inside there, and that's so the suspension can travel, and the tire can, you know, it actually swings out as the suspension comes up, so it has to be able to have play somewhere. You don't want to pull on this too hard, all right? Because some of them have a retaining circlip on the inner hub, some of them don't. All right, and if you pull it out, it's possible that there's a little roller ball in there that'll fall off, and it's a mess. Okay, and then all the CV grease comes out when you try and get the boot off to get in there and fix it, and it's a real pain. So just keep that in mind. CV is supposed to move like that and be loose. There's a little bit of play back and forth, but don't yank it. You'll rip it out of the boot, or you rip the boot, or the balls in there will come out, and it's a disaster. Ask me how I know. I've done it a couple of times in my younger years of doing this stuff. So we're going to gently pull this spindle out, watching that, oops, rusty heat shield. If you got rusty heat shields, just rip them off. You don't really need them. Try and get this in there. That ABS wire is really tight though. I think I'm going to do something a little different here and just turn this. There we go. Make sure the brake caliper doesn't fall down. And try and pull it out just a little bit. There we go. Okay, I'm going to try and see if I can see the holes here where the... Okay, so they're side to side. I'm going to turn this side to side, so the holes should line up around here. And basically, just slide it up and in. There you go. It's starting to go in. Yeah, I'm pretty close. Okay. Now, obviously the spindle's hitting the ball joint now, so I'm going to push this down by hand. Let me get my head in here and have a look. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to fire the CD nut and its washer on. Together. I think it's going to go anywhere anyways, but less parts on the ground the better, right? You framed in there? Okay, you guys are a little bit out of frame. Let me adjust that. Let's see what the heck's going on. There. Now, the hard part is getting these bolts back in the bottom, so my head might be in the way, sorry. These are a pain to line up sometimes. And apparently it's not going to be that bad today. So I get this one started. This lower ball joint bolt. And I'm going to run it most of the way in. If I don't run it in, it'll hit the control arm when I turn this to get the other bolt in. Is it framed in? Yeah, you guys can see what I'm doing here. Oh. Stanley ratchets like to reverse on their own. Like that. Oh my God. Okay, it's snug. I'm just going to back it off a bit and turn this. and hopefully the ball joint turns with it. I'm going to stick my fingers into there and try and hold the ball joint so it turns with the spindle and strut assembly. Next job is going to be the strut top. It's seizing up, that's why it keeps turning back on its own. Okay, there we go. You guys can probably, yeah, you guys can see that. So this is basically how this ball joint bolts in. Ah, there you go. That's like the best view of the day right there. Oh yeah, while you're down here too, you might as well look at your CV boot and make sure there's no holes in it. You know, if the grease starts coming out, they don't take very long to pack themselves in. Let me give this a good yank here, make sure it's getting tight. Let me try the 17 more wrench. I might have a better angle on it. No, definitely not. Okay, there's that one. Turn this the other way and get the back one. Okay. Put the tie rod end in. Let's put some grease on that with a glove. Just gonna smear it. You guys can see that. Okay, a little bit out of frame there. I'm just gonna smear the grease on the taper seat and the boot itself. I'm trying to do this so you guys can see it. It's a little hard because it's in the background here. So basically like that, if you can see it. I got it all over the taper and the boot, where the boot will sit against the spindle arm, just to keep it lubricated from binding. It's got to get changed anyways, it's got a hole in it, but there's other work I got to do before I do that. And I'm going to put a little bit across the top of the threads there just to keep that from seizing in there anymore. We'll get the glove. Try not to get my fingers too dirty here, because I don't have any place to wash my hands. Okay, yeah, I got some of the threads. And I got some of my fingers too, of course. And because we cleaned it up, it runs right on there by hand like nothing. Now, tie rod ends. You don't have to reef these things on. Alright, just get them snug. Once it bottoms out, just give it a tweak. No more than like a quarter turn or so. Well, let's see what this one does. Can I get it up there? A lot of people like reaming these things on there, and then it's like, holy Christ, you can't get this freaking thing out of the taper after you try and get it apart. It doesn't need to be crazy tight. It's a taper seat. It'll center itself and seat itself. Okay, once it snugs up, it comes into the taper, go like the next cancellation, that's it. Like, you don't have to go any more than that. You know, they shouldn't really come loose, ever. I've never had any come loose, but, you know, it's first for everything, I guess, but just use your better judgment. It doesn't have to be reefed on there. Don't use air tools at all. You know, you can get it started with an air tool if it's spinning the, you know, the stud in the ball or something. You know, it's spinning down the bottom. And, you know, you can get the gun and zip it on there. Go, you know, hit it a few times and see if it'll pull it up. But once it bottoms, you got to stop and then just do it by hand. Tie rod ends aren't really that strong. Oh, apparently I need an inner tie rod too. Some more good news for the day. All right, so this hub is pretty clean. There's no real rust buildup here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna fire the rotor on, and hopefully I don't get any crap in between. Because if I do, cause a problem with lug nuts coming loose. You can tell when you put it on. Yeah, I can hear it crunching, so there's something in there. Let me get a scraper here and we'll scrape it out. And it's around the center hub here. Just quick cleanup. Oh yeah, now all the stuff's falling out. Okay. This is the joy of trying to put used rotors back on, is the loose rust falls in there when you're trying to do it. So you gotta be careful when you put these on. Don't bang them around too much. Let's see if there's any chunks of stuff here. There's still a lot of grease in the hub. I wonder if I have spray grease here. I don't think I do. So I'm gonna try and do this without getting my gloves too messed up with grease. I'm just gonna give it a light smear, a really light smear. I really don't like using actual grease in between here. I'd rather use like a spray grease, like HHS 2000, the Worth stuff, or motorcycle chain lube. That stuff works really good. You know, it goes on thin and then thickens up over time. That's good stuff to use, because it gives time for the rotor to get on there and squeeze it all out before it starts getting too thick, right? Lithium grease works pretty good too, like the spray stuff. You just give it a quick spritz with that, and that'll keep the rotor from rusting on. Line, obviously, you know, the screw holes line up with the taper in the rotor. Yeah, feels pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to try and hold it on there. Okay, stay there. And obviously, if you ever bring your car to the shop for a brake job and you don't want the guys breaking your screws off, put some grease on there. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you probably do your own brake jobs, but still, it's worth it to save these screws, because then it holds all this together if you're working under here and keeps rust from falling in behind here. You know, if you want, you can also put an impact, like the impact driver on these, just to knock them snug, but you really don't need to go much tighter than hand tight. There we go. Okay, now the brakes. I have to go in there and turn the wheel on the car so I can get in here. Give me a sec. Okay, sorry, this is going to be edited like crazy because I keep hitting the stop button on record. But now we're going to fire the brakes on. As you can see, the CV nut's still loose. I'm obviously going to tighten this up once I get the tire on. Where's that carrier? Oh yeah, we got to clean this up a little bit too. Alright, let me give it a quick scrape out in here. And then I'm going to go get the grease that you should be using on this stuff. I got a couple of tubes of it in there. Just a quick scrape out. This car needs brakes anyways, so I don't want to get too crazy with it. This spring I'll redo the brakes and everything. And I'll clean all this out. I'll have a wire wheel available and all that, and I can clean all this crap off here. I don't have brake clean here with me today. Yeah, the boot looks okay. Let's see what the pin looks like. Yeah, it's a bit of... This is the worst part of doing this, is trying to clean this up. If you've got a sandblaster, it makes this a lot easier. But these boots are getting... They're old and they're pretty swelled, right? They barely seal on the pin. So they're just going to keep rusting up. I'm just going to do a quick job at get this rust out of here and throw some lube on it, fire it back together just to get me through the winter. That looks pretty good. Okay, let me get the lube. Okay, so here's, like, you can use this, like dielectric grease on those boots and anywhere there's rubber on your brake system. Here's another brand. You know, Clean Flow Easy Slide. This stuff works pretty good. Sil Glide. This old stuff, the yellow, it's like yellowish color. This is good stuff. This stuff works really good. This is like white. And this stuff is a little, I find a little more like toothpaste than you know, it doesn't really matter. They all work. It's just to keep the boots from swelling up and obviously keep things from seizing up. So whatever your choice brand is, You know, it doesn't really matter. Use something anyways. Alright, so we're going to give this a little paste here. So you want to lube underneath here, like that, where the boot sits. I'm going to put lots because the boot fits kind of loose. And then down here. You don't need to douse the whole thing. Just, you know, get a little bit on it so it slides. If you put too much, it ends up air locking the pin in there, and then it won't go in all the way and creates nothing but problems. Alright, so there's the pin. I'm only going to do the one, I'm not going to do the other one. And then next you got to do, I don't know how well it's going to work with gloves, but where that boot sits, put a whole bunch in there, in the groove and everything. Not really working so well with the glove on. Let me get the boot. We'll do it this way. I kind of wish it would focus. I'm just going to rub it around the boot here where it pops in. Like that. Fire it into the bracket. Again, this boot's a little bit swelled, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to get it in there. Okay, it's not in the groove yet. Come on. There we go. Looks like it's in there to me. Still a little tighter than I'd like it to be, but oh, see, that's how you know the boot's all screwed up. It just popped out of the carrier. So let me get some of that grease out of there. Yeah, there's a whole bunch in the bottom. Okay, where's that? Yeah. If you look at it when I press it in, and then when I pull it out, see the little tail on the end? That means it's bottoming out on grease. So just wipe the end of it off and do it again. Now I'm going to put this boot back in because I think we're pretty close to where we need to be. I'll try and get that boot back in there. It's pretty soft. My phone's falling down. Get that boot back in there. There we go. Yeah, the boots, yeah, this spring. New boots and everything. Oh, why does it keep popping out like that? It's weird, I never, oh, you know what, it's because it's sealing so well on the pin. Because it's all old and worn. Get it back in there. Come on. Okay, fit in the groove now. Let's see if it'll go now. Yeah, it's air locking in there a little bit, so I'm going to try twisting it and see if it'll go in. Okay. The phone keeps falling off the car. Let me fix that first. Okay. Hopefully it'll stay there now. Let's see if I can wiggle it without that boot popping out again. Okay. Well, it's close. Don't come out of there. Again, it shouldn't do this. I'm going to try and get in there with a pick and see if I can let the air out. So what's happening is it's trapping the air in behind there and it's pushing the boot out of its groove because it's so soft and, you know, expanded and all that. There we go. I just heard a bunch of air hiss out. Yeah, should be fine now. So in this case, you'd want to get, you know, stuff like this starts happening. You want to get new boots and all that, and, you know, new slide pins. The thing, car's 12 years old, right? So this stuff is, you know, it's kind of probably past due for being replaced, but because I make sure I put it together right, it's never really been an issue once it's together. So where those slides go, I'm not going to get into cleaning all this rust off. Nothing was seized, so I'm just going to give them a re-grease. basically just put stuff on here on the brake caliper carrier, and then I'm going to do the same on this side. You don't have to use the Silglide stuff here if you don't want to. You can use regular anti-seize if you want, but this stuff is way better because it doesn't wash off as quickly in you know, rainstorms and all that, and it helps keep things from rusting together. And it does eventually rust, but you know, if you can make it a year, then you do your brake servicing once a year is pretty good if you ask me. And our clip goes on. I don't know if you guys can see that. Oh. These clips should, you know, they should fit pretty firmly on there too. Like, you don't want it falling off or whatever when you're trying to put the brakes together. It's never any fun. And then put some more Silglide on top where the, you know, the pad sits in here. So I'd like to put some Silglide in there too to keep the pad from rusting to it. I'm gonna do the same on the other side. Flip it over. And where's that clip? Okay, here's the other clip. Just kind of clips on. Get it down the groove there. And then put some here too, where the bolts goes through and it sits in the spindle. I've had experiences where if you clean this up, and if you have to, the back of the spindle too, it actually gets rid of a lot of that really weird noise you make when you're at like a stoplight and you're kind of dragging the brakes and it goes just as you're dragging. If you clean all this up and get all the rust and stuff off, it tends to get rid of that. Not all the time, but for the most part it helps. Usually when you get a lot of that noise and your car just does it all the time regardless, it's usually, you know, just bad brake pads where they're just not the proper friction material or something like that, and it makes that noise. But I've had experiences where I had cars come in that I did brake jobs on, they made that noise, and then after cleaning everything up and lubing it, it didn't do it anymore. So, you know, it may be worth a shot, right? If you got it apart because you're doing something, try lubing everything up and see if it gets rid of that problem for you. So I'm just going to run these up. Again, you don't need to reef this stuff on like 1,000 foot-pounds or anything. Just snug it, you know. Find the torque specs if you're not sure, and just snug it up. It doesn't have to be that tight. Surprisingly, it doesn't take all that much torque to keep the stuff all tightened together. What causes stuff coming apart is not being properly installed, as in like stuff seized up, or like if you got these pins seized up, usually you'll get your caliper, the bolts that go in here will come loose because the caliper's twisting and stuff when you hit the brakes. If you keep all this, you know, lubed up and free and all that, it should never come loose. Alright. Now, normally, I would put that grease stuff, this stuff, the Silglide, or the brake lube, whatever you want to call it, on the back of the pads and also in behind the shim. So some pads have these shims come off. I don't think these ones do. No, these are just cheap aftermarket, so I can't get it off. But depending on the kind of car you have, I think the OEM pads for this car, this shim, there's a steel shim on top of the pad here. Alright, and ideally, when you get new pads, you want to take those shims off if you can. If they come off, if they're glued on, just leave them. And put that grease underneath the shim, and then put it on top. Usually just where the caliper touches. You can see, you know, the caliper only touches right here, right? So you put some of that grease there, and that keeps the squeal down, that high-pitched squeal that you sometimes get from your brakes when you come up to a stop sign or a stoplight or whatever. And if you grease that, and then, you know, the inside pad also in behind, and again, use this stuff because there's obviously rubber on the piston or on the caliper, so you don't want to get any petroleum-based grease there because it'll swell that boot up and it'll start leaking and seize up. But you keep these pads lubricated in behind here. This is the friction surface, so I'm talking about the other side where the caliper sits. It'll keep the noise down. You know what? I'll just do it anyways on this one. I wasn't going to do it because I got to change the brakes anyways, but it's just a little bit of grease there like that. And then slide your pads in. Make sure they're in the clips properly and you're not catching anything, and they should move free. It should move by hand just like that. That's it. And same with this one. So as you can see, it's been well greased. There's a huge lip of dirt here from all the grease and stuff that's been on it. I think this shim comes off. Oh, this shim is actually... Okay, yeah, see, this shim was glued on when I put these pads on. So now it's building up rusting behind it, and it's actually starting to lift off. So when that happens, when you start getting rust build up in behind these shims, it'll actually make your pedal spongy. Because you're pushing on rusting behind instead of, you know, clean steel, right? I don't know if I take this off. Yeah, see, this was glued on. Yeah, so there you go. Like that kind of crap will make your brake pedal spongy, especially if it's really bad. So I'm just going to give it a quick cleanup. I'm not going to go crazy with it, because like I said, I'm just doing brakes in the spring anyways. So this shim came off, so I'm going to show you that, you know, obviously if you have removable shims on the back of your pads, you know how to do it. If the shims look terrible and they're all rusty and falling apart, but you got lots of brakes left, you can leave these shims off. These are just squealer shims. They just make the brakes quieter. You don't have to have them on there. So if they're look like garbage, then just throw them away and just put the grease right on the back of the pad and throw it in there. Some pads don't even come with these shims. Like a lot of heavy trucks and stuff or commercial vehicles don't even have like squealer shims. It's just the piston right on the back of the pad. But I'm going to do this one, so you know, put the grease on. Put your shim back on. Now obviously this shim came off. The shims that are removable usually have little tangs here that hold the shim lined up with the pad for when you put it on. But this one just got these little pins here. And, you know, as well as I do, that's not going to stay lined up very well. So I'm going to try my best to get this on there. I'm going to clean some of this junk off of here. Yeah, you see it, like even as I play with it, it's coming off. Put some more grease where the piston sits. Just a little bit. Just need a little bit of a smear. Now, we want to be careful that this doesn't fall off when we're trying to get the caliper on. So I'm going to slide this in. Oh, another thing to note too is squealer tabs. Good, you guys can see it in the video too. So let me get this grease up the end of the screwdriver so I can see what we're doing here. This guy right here, this is a brake wear squealer. Okay, so basically what happens is when your brakes get to a certain point, as you can see, this one's almost touching. You can't really see it, but there's a little bit of a gap there still. So I got about maybe 15% brakes left, 15, maybe 20. But once this pad wears out and that squealer starts touching, it makes a ton of noise, like a brrr as you drive. So the whole point of this is you want this squealer tab on the leading edge of the rotor, so the rotor would spin this way as you're driving the car. So you want that tab to be towards where the rotor would normally turn against, right? So as you drive forward, the rotor spins this way and basically pushes this tab down into itself. All right, and the reason for that is so when you're driving around town and your brakes are worn out, because you don't need to get your brakes on the instant this thing starts making noise. You got about 10% left once they start going off. But it's designed so that when you back up, it pulls this tab out and basically pulls it away from everything and makes a really loud, it's a really weird noise. And you can hear it like right away, so that when you're backing out of the driveway or backing out of a parking spot, you know, oh, what's that? There's something wrong with my brakes, right? But then when you're driving to the garage or something, you don't have to listen to that noise the whole way there, right? So just make sure that that they're on the leading edge of the rotor. So the other side has a pad, and it's going to have this same tip and a squealer tang here, and it's on the top also. So look at the pads, because usually if you hold the pads where they're the same, the one will be on the opposite side of the pad than the other, and then you know that one goes on each side. Some of the cheaper sets just have the squealers on the same side on both pads. So sometimes they'll be on the top on one side and on the other side on the bottom, on the other, you know, on the bottom on the other side of the car. Some of them have them on both pads. Just pay attention to that when you take it apart. And what else can we tell you here too? Some of them, yeah, and some of the cheaper pads, like I said, will have one on the bottom. Usually, if it only has squealers on one pad, the pad with the squealer tab is the inside. Okay, more often than not, these squealers go on the inside pad. The inside pad wears out first because it's direct off the caliper to push it. It doesn't have to go through these slide pins. There is a bit of friction in these slide pins when you actuate your brakes, so the inner pad, as you can see, is worn out more than the outer, and they always wear like that. And that's why usually you put the squealer tab on the inside. All right. So now that we're done with the theory, let's get the caliper out here. Now, when you put your caliper on, make sure there's no twists and loops in your brake line here. You guys can't see it, but you know, have a good look at that. Make sure it's not cracked and splitting and all that. Like, you know, Kia used pretty good rubber with these things. I've never changed these things. They're still not even cracking yet. They're still pretty soft and flexible. But have a look at that. You know, obviously earlier I freaking dropped the caliper on the brake hose and didn't rip out. So, you know, whatever. It is what it is. I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna have a look in here. So, just in case you weren't here earlier, you want to make sure when you put this together that this rubber boot, you can't see it here. Let me get back in. This rubber boot here, you see it? You want to make sure it's not overlapping the piston. So this is the hard piston in the caliper. Now it's not so bad now because the brakes are, you know, been on the car for a while and they're worn in. So this piston's been moving out over the months and coming out. So the boot's not going to overlap it. But when you push this in to put new brake pads on the car, usually more often than not, this boot will like kind of balloon out. I'll see if I can do it here without wrecking it. And hang over top of the edge of the piston. Okay, so when you go and slide this onto the pad, it actually cuts a hole in the boot. And once you do that, the water gets in there, rots this piston, and then, you know, you're in for a caliper, right? These are original calipers for the car. Never been changed. 420,000 kilometers, 12-year-old car. I've never changed calipers yet. And then obviously if you take them apart, another thing you can do too is, I don't know if you guys will be able to see this, where's my pick? What I like to do too is before I do a brake job, I'm going to try and get this so that I don't, before I do a brake job, what I'll do is, I'll get my pick in here and I'll find the edge of the boot, and it's right here. And I'll just gently get under it without poking too hard. You want to be careful. And I'll get in there and I'll pull it up and have a look inside to see if it's rusty before I push the piston in to put new pads on. If it's rusty in there, put the old stuff back on, your old pads, put it all back together, drive to the store and get a caliper, because once it's rusted in there, if you push that piston in, it's going to rip the seal and it's going to start leaking everywhere anyways. So once you push that piston in, you know, and that rust passes the seal that sits in here to seal this piston to the brake fluid that's in behind. If you rip that, it's going to start leaking everywhere, and then you got a whole other world of problems. So if you just very gently, you know, and you can pull it up, take a flashlight, look in there and see if you can see any rust on the back of the piston in here. And if there is a bunch of rust, there's a bunch of rust here. Probably want to clean it up and get that same grease and grease those lips so they don't, you know, it doesn't get water in there as the rust builds up, right? And also, you don't need much more than channel locks, big trucks or something like that, like a decent pair of channel locks. You can squeeze this in, all right? If it gets tight, I see guys go at this with a C-clamp. It shouldn't take a whole lot of force to push these pistons in. If it takes a lot of force, there's something wrong. Either the piston's rusted, or your brake lines are collapsing, or you didn't take the cap off the reservoir. Sometimes that'll, if there's too much fluid in the system, it'll, you know, get stopped up against the cap and you can't push it all the way in. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're doing it. You know, you want to be gentle with your brakes at the same time. You don't want to, you know, they do a lot of work, but you got to be gentle with them. So we're going to try and get this on. I'm just making sure. So I'm just going to wiggle it, and it'll push the piston back. There we go. So basically all I did was I just pulled I'm pulling the caliper out like this, and it's pushing the piston back a bit so it slides on easier. There, you can see how loose it is now. So just sitting there. And then obviously when I go in and hit the brakes, it's going to tighten all that back up. Oh yeah, and keep in mind too, if you ever push these pistons back to do work or something, and you're not putting new brakes on, and there's a huge gap between the piston and the pads, pump your brakes up before you even try and drive the car anywhere. Because it takes, if you got all the pistons all the way back and the pads are, you know, like worn out like these ones are, it takes quite a few pumps to get them to bottom everything out again, to where you have brake pedal. So just keep that in mind. Again, these little screws, like small wrench, this is all you need to put them on. Like, they don't need to be that tight. As long as everything's clean, nothing's seized up, they won't come loose. Again, check your manual for the torque, but just snug. They don't have to be reefed on there. So if you want to check and see if your brakes need attention, what you can do is, now that we put it back together, this is what it should look like if you want to check your brakes. Everything should move. There's a little bit of play in the slides, and then if I push this back, I can see the pad moves by hand on this side, and then on this side, yeah, this pad's moving by hand also. So that's an easy way to check your brake servicing to see if you need to address your brakes. So you can see the slower slide is moving, and the upper slide's moving. Let me see if I can get that piston back. Don't recommend doing this unless you can see what you're doing, but I'm going to try and move the piston back a bit further so there's more play in here. We can have a good look. If you're ever going to do this, be very careful because you could rip the boot, you know, the piston boot if it's in there. Yeah, so everything moves. Everything's free. The slides are free. The caliper moves, and the pads move. If none of this stuff moves by hand, then, you know, take it apart, clean it all up, like you seen earlier in the vid. Alright, I guess I can't turn the wheel by hand. Let me straighten that tire out. We're going to put the tire on, tighten the CB nut, and that's basically the ball game. Okay, so I'm going to fire the tire on now. I'm sure everybody's seen how that's done before, right? It's pretty simple stuff. Well, apparently the car is sinking on the jack stand. Oh yeah, is it ever? Okay, let me get the jack out now. Jack out to get the tire on. I'm just going to jack it enough to get the tire on. Like that. Go. Oh, if you ever have problems with your, you know, having to beat the heck out of your rim to get it off your car, if you clean up, let me get the thing framed in a little bit better here. If you clean up in, you know, where the rim overlaps the center hub there, the piece that sticks out of the hub, clean all the rust and stuff off of that. That's usually what it seizes up on. A little bit of grease on it will keep it from rusting up on you, and that obviously is, you know, because your tire only ever goes flat when it's the worst possible time to be changing a tire. So unless you got CA, then you're lucky. But I prefer to just do it instead of waiting 3 hours for the guy to show up. You know what I mean? Places to go, people to see. Okay, so I'm just going to snug these up. I'm not going to use the torque wrench. I'm just going to like hand tighten them just to keep the tire and rim centered up on the hub so that I can lower the car down and tighten them properly. And then tighten the CB nut. Apparently my jack does not like the cold. Okay, let's see if we're still framed in here. Okay, we're not. Obviously not, because the suspension's collapsed now. Alright. So I think the torque on the lug nuts in this car is like 70 foot-pounds or something like that. So that's what I'm going to go to, 70. Again, not very tight. It's a lot looser than you think. So if you ever noticed, if you have a car kit and you ever look in there, the little dinky wrench they give you, the wrench is literally, I don't know if I can get this framed in here so you get an idea, but the wrench is literally like a foot long, and that's to keep you from actually over tightening your lug nuts when you're changing your tire on the side of the road. Like, it's maybe half of this wrench. It's just a short little dinky wrench they give you, and that's so you can basically lean on it with most of your body weight and not over torque the lug nuts. So if you're ever wondering why they give you such a crappy little wrench, That's why go to the store and, you know, get yourself a big breaker bar. So you don't have to buy a torque wrench. You know, get like a breaker bar like one of these guys, right? Great big long handle on it. Let's see if I can get this in frame here. You know, the big one. Just so you can get them off, and then use your dinky one to put them back on. Sorry for the, you know, lack of a better word for it, but they're ridiculously small wrenches, and especially if you haven't been lubing your lug nuts, they could be a real pain to get the lug nuts off. So I'm gonna set this to 250. I don't normally do this. I usually just run it on with the gun. But I'm gonna put this to 250 foot-pounds anyways, because as we seen earlier, as I was clamping all that together, it really didn't take much more than 30 foot-pounds to pull the hub into the bearing. So if you remember earlier, this is the same apparatus as the puller, or the tool that I used to get the hub into the bearing. So it's not going to take a lot of torque anyways to put this on. So we're just going to torque it to the generic 250 foot-pounds. So the wrench is set to 250. Oh, it's still quite a bit. Okay, there it is. Now, of course, I have to go a little bit more to get the next hole to line up. You always want to go more, not less. And just a little bit more. A little bit more yet. I think that will go there. Ah, look at that. Alas. Okay. And that concludes the wheel bearing install. Well, I hope you guys enjoy. I'm going to try to trim this video down a bunch, so obviously I'm going to post the resultant video of, you know, trimming and cutting out all the in-between stuff. Maybe I'll just throw the thing up the way it is. In that case, it's probably about 2.5 hours long, but not really a terrible job, as you can see. I showed the tools you need to do it, the special tools anyways. I guess depending on the kind of car you have, you know, check. You want to get a manual to see how your bearings are particularly laid out. Some of them are cartridge style, where it's just like 3 or 4 bolts hold the whole hub and everything in the spindle. It's like you pop the bolts out and hammer it out and put the whole new one in. You don't have to do any of that pressing or anything. You know, usually they're more expensive than this style, but if you ever come across having to do this style, well, I think all the tools cost me, well, it's $270 for all the stuff off Amazon. That's the slide hammer and the bearing presser tool, and then the bearing splitter was another $160. So for what, like $350, $400? You know, you save yourself a whole bunch of money. That's like one wheel bearing change at the shop, and just labor's like $300 or $400 easy. So you buy the tools, you do it yourself once, and now you have the tools. It only costs you the wheel bearing next time and the time to do it. So what time is it now? I don't know if my phone will let me see what time it is. No, it won't let me see what time it is as it's recording. So it took me maybe, what, 3 or 4 hours to do it? Not terrible. Now I got the rest of the day to do whatever. Anyways, thanks for watching.